This video is brought to you by Straight Goods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit straightgoods.ca.
Rail transport is the backbone of the Canadian economy. More than 70% of all service goods in Canada are shipped by rail. But a lot of the services are unreliable, resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars in economic damages every year. 80% of service commitments for agricultural rail customers are not met by rail companies. Other customers like logging, mining, automotive, and chemicals experience the same problem. With their monopoly position, the big rail companies will keep on shortchanging their tabling the Rail Customer Protection Act. This act will give every rail customer the right to have service agreements with railway companies, namely CN and CP. It would include performance standards, consequences for non-performance, including penalties, and a requirement to use the resolution process in the event of a disagreement. It would also require advance notice for any service standards change. There have been a lot of talk by this government about legislation. Mediation have taken place, and it has failed. Enough talk, action is now. So rail customer will finally get reliable and predictable rail freight services that deliver quality products on time.
And speaking as a Western Canadian, I want to add my voice to how critically and vitally important fair and accessible rail transportation is, especially for the grain industry in the region that I represent. Since Confederation, Canadian parliamentarians have had to legislate fair rates for rail transportation because the gouging was legendary in older times. Now, there hasn't been a rail costing review since 1992 to determine if the profits and the prices charged by railroads for shipping Western Canadian grain met any measurement of fairness. There was a comprehensive study done in 2010 which found that even though a 20% margin is considered fair profitability, prairie farmers were being charged between 50 and 60% margin on this. Now, I have the numbers broken down here, but Canadian farmers were paying hundreds of millions of dollars in excess of a fair markup to have their grain moved to market. And let me emphasize how vitally important this is for Canadian producers, because Canadian grain farmers ship their grain to port farther than any other country that you can mention. The average Saskatchewan farmer is 1,400 kilometers from port, and one of their biggest costs is getting their product to market. Compare that to Kansas, where it's 500 kilometers. Compare that to Australia, where it's 180 kilometers to the nearest port. We need fair rail and effective and efficient rail transportation system. With the demise of the Western Grain Transportation Act, which used to set these rates from time to time, we now have Olivia Chow, member for Trinity-Spadina, introducing legislation that we hope will ensure some modicum of fairness, not only in accessibility to grain transportation services, but in the prices we're being charged. The era of the robber baron with a monocle surely is over. Members of Parliament have a vital role to play to ensure that our rail transportation system is robust and fair. Thank you.
I think it's the relentless lobbying of CN and CP, right? First, it was the stakeholders review, right? That took a few years. The review was very clear in its recommendation, saying that you need legislation. But it also recommended, well, let's try mediation. Some of us at that time was a bit cynical that mediation would work, but we said, okay, all right, let's give it a try. So last March, just before the last election, there was a grand press conference. The Conservative promised legislation, right, that it would happen. And then nothing happened through the entire year last year after the election. At the end of last year, Mr. Dinning was appointed, and then, of course, he did the mediation. He did his best. Everybody participated, and surprise, surprise, it didn't work. And again, there was empty promises that legislation would come, and by gosh, there will be action. So I'm assisting the Conservative government right now. If Mr. Harper's Conservative really mean what they say, take this bill. I've done the groundwork for them. I took this it took a bit of time. I took the service review, I took the core components and made it into a bill. The same bill that they should have. The same kind of elements in it, which, of course, as I said earlier, includes the performance review, the dispute mechanism, and advance notice, and all those components. It's not new, but it needs to be done. So here's my private member's bill. I welcome the Conservative to take it, make it their own, and table it first thing they come back in the summer break, and make this act a reality, because rail customers need protection now. And I hope these customers throughout the summer will talk to their members of parliament to say, enough talk. Well, the customers now. The Western farmers, it's not just Western farmers, by the way. It's auto, it's logging companies, mining companies. They're all saying the same thing. They came together, which is what Bob Ballantyne's group represent. And they have been promised. So they want to give the Conservative government the benefit of doubt. And they've been promised and promised and promised. So quite a few of them are getting very impatient. You probably saw the ad in Hill Times. You saw the articles that this coalition of rail shippers have put together. And what does this bill do? This bill will mandate and say to CNCP that they must, they shall, they have to have a service agreement with their customers. And that there has to be performance standards. If those standards are not met, there should be penalties. If you change the schedule or services of any kind, give proper notice. If there's dispute between both parties, they should have a dispute resolution mechanism. None of that exists right now. And this is making sure that there is protection for
if I
rail
agree with that, Barry. I mean, I'm holding a press release here that's signed by the Keystone Agricultural Producers, the NFU, the Wild Rose Agricultural Producers, the Association of Prairie Agricultural Producers of Saskatchewan. So, farm groups have been doing, everything they can to get the government's attention on this, but I think Olivia hit the nail on the head that they're losing the lobbying war. I mean, the rail lobby for 100 years in Canada has been one of the most powerful and relentless. The revolving door, or the well-connected conservative lobbyists who represent the railways have, easy access to the PMO, and they're getting their message across. And producers are saying, look, since 1992, you haven't even done a rail costing review to see if what the railways are charging us is anywhere near fair. And never mind the Dinning study, but the Edsforth study that did a rail costing review found that they were being gouged. The railways are making profits at greater profits than any time in their history. And this is a strategic transportation link. It's unlike any other business. It's unlike the airlines even, which moves predominantly people. We rely on our railroads. That's why there was a national initiative. When they were privatized and when the rail efficiencies took place, those efficiencies were supposed to be passed on to the grain producers in reduced rates. That end of the deal was never held up. So, this couldn't be more timely. Olivia has done the groundwork for the government, and perhaps the best hope for a private member's bill is that the government of the day not only sees the merits of the bill, but feels the pressure from the players, from the actors, and implements this immediately, hopefully even before the shipping of the next in the 2012 crop, 20 million tons of grain have to be moved off to the prairies this fall. And there's an uncertainty in the air, not only the marketing with the CWB being gone, but the transportation rates. Who knows?
For the fall.
There's one Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. I don't care where it comes from. It could be from agriculture. It could be from transport. It just needs to be done. I've done all the groundwork for them. Any member of Parliament, if they want to take this private member's bill and get it past 3 stages, 3 readings, and get the Senate to approve it, be my guest. It's going to be public by 3:15 this afternoon. So it doesn't matter which cabinet ministers. All of them have provided promises, by the way. Chuck Straw was promising. And every transport minister, every agriculture minister have said the same thing. All it's needed now is action.